11th. All right. Good morning, everyone. Today is February 11th, and this is our monthly SCD community meeting. We have a couple of items on our agenda. First, we'll have a quick Fossa intro. I'm putting a link there. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm not sure who is presenting for this one. Okay, Max, go on. You are on mute right now.
Hi, thanks everyone.
Yeah.
My name is Max.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Cool. So I want to keep this relatively brief. My name is Max McCone. I work for a company called Fossa. We're based in San Francisco. We are an open source management tool. So what our tool does is we integrate as part of the CI environment or connect with your code repositories to track open source usage within the organization. We track licenses and vulnerabilities, and then help your teams remediate license violation issues or security vulnerabilities, as well as generate reports like bill of materials or attributions for any sort of open source diligence, open source audits associated with the business. So some of the customers we work with, you can see there, are Uber, Twitter, Zendesk. We also work with smaller organizations and even some non-software based tech companies like, for example, Ford Motor Company, TD Ameritrade. Really, the idea here is to help developers use open source more efficiently. Some of you might be familiar with tools like Black Duck, or if you used those in the past. Our tool is designed to be easier to integrate with software development lifecycle, with your code repositories, and ultimately make it more efficient for your organization to manage open source. Happy to answer some questions, and also I can provide a quick peek into the UI if the group is interested. Maybe curious to get a read on the group if open source is an area that you guys help manage at your companies, or if you have some just general questions about how the tool works, I'm happy to answer them.
Peter, do you want to give a little bit background of why we're doing this intro?
Okay, so story here is that we were in the PR where we were adding support for security scanner. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the security scanner that it's part of the GitHub. Mm-hmm. On the list of CI integration, the Fossa appeared with some warnings. And for this reason, I registered to check what violation of licenses we were reported with, and then was contacted with questions like whether I'm interested. So I pointed on this meeting, and I don't know how it happened that we have this single run with Fossa. It might be because this CNCF PR that was reviewed for experimentally added that, because I don't think all our currently CI runs in GitHub have Fossa integration. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. And what I just did is I shared the Fossa CLI scanner in the chat. It's the GitHub page. The Fossa CLI is open source itself. And so if you're curious to learn more about how Fossa scans repositories or integrates as part of the CI, you can refer to that guide, and certainly contact me if you're curious about learning more about Fossa. I'll put my email address in the chat as well. But that's pretty much it for me, unless there are specific questions about open source management that anybody wants to ask.
Max, if you don't mind, can I put your email in the SED shared document?
Sure thing. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, a real quick question here, as Peter mentioned, right? I think Peter, one of the PR that Chris at CNCF opened, right, for us related to code security, and that's where we noticed the failure, the Fossa failure for us. I mean, what's the, I mean, is there any way, like like you said, Max, if there is something we can take a look later on with the doc or something where enabling the Fossa scanning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, he was failing without without any good error or anything that we could figure out at least that time.
I'd happy to look into that for you if I have a bit more context, or if you're able to send me exactly what you're seeing. I can provide some answers for you. I mean, really, what Fossa does is you are able to define within the tool what licenses, open source licenses, are allowed and which ones are not allowed. And then when we run the scans, we enforce those rules against the open source that we detect, and flag issues that violate those policies. We can even configure it to fail builds if a super restrictive license is detected. But if you're able to contact me and want to send more information about what your specific question is, happy to do so. Let's see here.
Okay.
Oh, do
Yeah,
we
I think
have a PR
that helps. Yeah,
failure?
absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So and yeah, that's the pull request, right, Peter? I'm glad you found it. So yeah, that's where but we can take it offline now.
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So do you think you will talk about the migration of the documentation?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I wanted to put it, for today's meeting. I think it's the right time. Peter is here, Nate is here. So just to give a little update here, and Peter, I just created another PR. I think Cube Prometheus had another failure because of backporting issue. But let me come to that after I just give a little brief here. So Wenji and everyone, we have etcd.io, which was broken. So Nate, a lot of great work from him. A lot of ideas from him, and we decided that we will migrate the doc from etcd.io to etcd website repo. So that work is, we had the PR merge yesterday, right? We removed pretty much everything from the documentation repo except the auto-generated docs. So for now, we'll try to figure out, if that can be done later. But for now, if you look in the documentation, you basically have just one folder and README file. Everything else is removed. So that was the update. But while doing so, we did run into one issue where the Cube Prometheus team got back to us that broke their dependency on etcd. Because they were using the mixing files that were part of the documentation, which supposed not to be there, but it was part of the documentation. They were relying on it. So part of that, we created. I think Peter created a PR where we moved things under country directory. And the Cube Prometheus, a lot of history within in the few PRs out there, but they basically started using the new location and everything looked good. So we removed even the documentation for mixing from the etcd repo. But I would just ping just a few minutes back, and that's what I was trying to work on it. That they requested to keep the mixing files at both location for time being in the country where the Peter created that folder, and also in the documentation folder because of the backporting issue. So the previous versions, they are failing, and they need some more time before they they create new release. So for time being, they're like, hey, can we keep it at both places? So I'm like, yeah, that sounds good to us. That's totally fine, right? So the PR is out there to put it back. So I mean, anyway, to short, I think we moved the documentation to the website repo. We will be doing some follow-up work there to make that repo better maintained later on, as we go forward. And so far we just ran into that one problem, and that we are taking care. That's pretty much it, and I think we can discuss more with any questions there. Nate, Peter, you want to give any updates there? If I missed something.
If they so I'm a little bit curious. What's the usage model, like why they need to sync online with it? But if it's a problem for them, we can keep it in both locations for some time. So I merged the PR that reverts the change.
Okay,
oh, so that's already
exactly.
been pulled in. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
I was a little bit surprised to see that dependency there too, but if it is what it is, so. I just wanted to update that obviously having removed everything, the website now has a link to the current documentation. So any updates moving forward, as we do releases and whatnot, we can just copy the current folder down into whatever the new release is and update that way. So that's all ready to go. And I do have some questions about some of the generated documentation that is on the website that doesn't seem to be linked. Things like, for instance, the mix-ins, does that need to be published on the website now anymore? And there's also a lot of things like the metrics that I'm curious about, if those do exist on the previous versions, but they don't seem to be linked anywhere. So I'm wondering if we need to do if we need those there anymore. So one of the things I'm moving on to right now is to quick clean up, making sure all the links and stuff are working, and I'm looking to sort of remove things that are no longer necessary in that. So. I should probably drop a link in for that PR or that issue just to be sort of explicit about it. But
so I think that list of metrics and their description is really useful. I think we were able to Google it when we need it, but I didn't recall this from page. So definitely I think we should link it from somewhere. And there is a script that generates them in the main repository.
Okay, so what I'm hearing.
Nate, I think your voice is picking up.
I'm sorry, yeah, it just froze there.
Yeah, now we can hear you. Could you repeat?
Okay, sorry. So yeah, so my what I'm hearing is that they should be left on the website, but they should be linked from somewhere on the website. So leave those types of things that look like they were a part of the documentation folder, but if it wasn't linked, make sure that it is actually accessible through some part of the navigation.
I think that this is a poorly generated document, so we can change the script that generates them to prepare a commit PR to the documents repository. What we should also rethink with this, I'm not sure how it's done, but we have different set of metrics reported by different etcd versions. And it would be useful to somehow report, at least shows that these are metrics in this etcd version and these are in this etcd version. Okay. Ideally, it could be a single list that says this metric was available between this and this version, but it makes the generation script pretty complicated, so probably cannot afford this.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very
Um,
much, Steve and Nate,
yep.
for Peter
Thank
for
you.
working on this for us. So Steve, is that all you have for the migration of the documentation?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think next issue Nate wants to discuss. That's interesting too. We all need to have some discussion there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's IBM documentation thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nate, do you want to brief it? Then I'll chime in too. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot to do with this except that, sorry, I'm trying to find my tab here. Here we go. So it looks like someone has a how-to usage. And
I'm sorry, we can't hear you very well.
I'm sorry. Oh, I've dropped.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
yeah, we can hear you now.
Yep. Okay. So there's a little bit of discussion of whether or not you should have a
Your voice
solution.
is breaking.
Hey, would it help, Nate,
Okay.
if I describe it? I describe the problem here. I know you were cutting a lot, so I think maybe it's network. I assume.
Yeah.
But please correct me if I missed something. But anyway, so somebody has created this PR, and it's basically, as it says, it shows the process of installing etcd on IBM Cloud, and he has documented a lot of things here. So part of the review, if you look in the conversation there, Wenji, I know Gio had some comment, I had some comment there, and Nate. So if you scroll down a little bit, I wasn't, right here, right? So I wasn't sure, what are you going to do with this, right? This PR was created in that particular directory that we have for platforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the only cloud provider specific doc we have is from AWS, but that doc was created way back, as I noticed, right? It was like, I would say it's more like a legacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says in history 2017 was created. So I wasn't sure, and I think the Nate had the same question. Like, maybe the maintainers, I think, should discuss this and see if what's our policy. I know Peter has a good question too, if CNCF has any policy, but I think it may not CNCF. I don't know, because like Kubernetes, for example, has a bunch of documentation from all cloud provider, right? A specific doc for for Google and IBM and others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for our project, right, at CD, I mean, what would be the a take here, right? I think that can help review this, or maybe in future other cloud providers as their similar documentation come up, right? Installing etcd on a different cloud provider. I mean, like Giho, one thing he mentioned is like, he's like, hey, let's just keep a more like a generic platform support kind of thing instead of a cloud provider specific things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is more like an something it's good to discuss, and I guess Nate, that's what you are looking for, right? Like, what will be the next step here? Can you simply say no, or can we say, hey, I mean, this will be something that applies to all cloud provider, I guess, right?
I think there's a lot of value in generic use cases, but I don't see a problem with platform-specific instructions if they are useful. I don't think that there is a CNCF prohibition on it. You mentioned Kubernetes. Dex has the same thing.
Yeah, there's no prohibition.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Yeah. So other thought here was, I was thinking that, like this particular PR, right? Like I said, whoever created it, but there's a long process here, right? It's basically a post. Other thing I was wondering was maybe just to keep in mind, right, that if provider has something on their website, right, where it's more accurate, I mean, maybe they can just provide a link here, right? We can have like a small file, and they have a, instead of, I'm saying, they say, hey, etcd on this provider, and they say, for further information, look at this link. So that way we will have like less maintenance. The only thing is if link break in future, but that the content can get outdated anyway, right? At some point, who knows?
Yeah, and I've seen that with Kubernetes as well, where if we can take instructions that have been replicated somewhere else, we've linked to those instructions because those types of things tend to get stale fairly quickly. So that's also a very viable way to go with those types of things if it is actually duplicated.
Right. Or I mean, if you want to go this way, that way, then we can suggest as part of the review that, hey, create a post, right? And I mean, that would be our recommendation, right? If you want to go that route, I would say. Yeah.
I mean, I actually kind of like the idea of having a subdirectory that has platform-specific instructions. And if we have this as a separate file, then we would actually have a last updated timestamp on it, which I think we can display in Doxy. So people would actually know how old it was.
Okay. Sure.
If we don't have that, then we can just ask them to put it as part of, put a timestamp at the top of the document and update it every time they update the document. Because I mean, like, even I've dealt with this on other projects, even when stuff has gotten out of date, often the out of date information is still useful, even if it's no longer effectively no longer complete.
I wonder what's the benefit of us hosting the docs over just linking to them in their repository, because we cannot review these docs because probably don't know all these platforms. And like we can trust and accept links to other docs, and it's probably up to them hosting the docs to make them up to date or convenient to users. So publish the date or not, whatever.
I'm looking at it from a user perspective, though, because the user doesn't necessarily want to pursue a bunch of links that may or may not be up to date as links. It's a lot easier for the user if they can kind of see this, because the user's starting, if we're assuming user's starting from the perspective of, hey, I want to set up etcd, where are you using etcd? Well, I'm using it on IBM Cloud, I'm using it on AWS, I'm using it on a Kubernetes cluster on Tanzu, something like that. It's nice to at least have a bare bones version of how to use that in our docs from the user perspective, because then they don't have to leave our docs in order to find that information, particularly because external entities tend to reorganize their own docs a lot along lines that aren't necessarily corresponding with our documentation workflow. The main reason I would see not to do it is maintenance load, right? Is that it can become a real pain to maintain if those communities are not actively participating in keeping it up to date. And my suggestion for sort of threading that needle would be that, we have a subdirectory for this, we make it available for the various platforms, and then we set a criteria where if everything starts getting out of date, then we change the policy and we start saying we're not going to host this stuff anymore. Because like under ideal circumstances, the various vendors maintain their own docs, and it stays maintained and it's easy access for our users, right? That's the best of all
Yep.
possible worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so the ideal, I think I'm good with either approach, but yeah, with the second one, right? I mean, user experience definitely one thing, but little counter there was if you provide a link, right, like a file itself for a particular provider with a link, and it will have contact information for the owner of the post. That hey, if something doesn't work, contact this owner, right? And they will update the link. Versus they open an issue in our repo, and then somebody create a PR. And I mean, ideally, there won't be a lot of incorrect information or changes that can prompt user to open issues time to time, and somebody has to create a PR, right? Versus the contact information is provided in the file, then the user just contact the owner, and the owner will basically update their link, their content on wherever they has posted it, right?
Yeah.
So less maintenance for us, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
I mean, I will say I have one other reason why I would kind of like this sort of thing to be in our docs, which is one of the goals here originally when we started this overhaul a year ago was to also improve the search ranking of our docs. And the more how do I do X content that's actually in our docs as opposed to linked out somewhere else, the better our search ranking is going to be.
Okay. That's a good point.
But the potential maintenance burden is a major drawback to having it included in our docs, and that could be a fail. Completely acknowledged.
We are talking about 2 docs. Sorry.
Yeah.
2 docs over last 2 or 3 years, so probably it's not a big maintenance cost to keep it.
I wonder if this might be a good candidate for a blog entry. Then it's not in the docs officially, sort of specifically. You would expect that it would sort of go out of date a little bit quicker. More ownership is put onto the blog writer, and it's still a way of bringing this type of information to our user base.
That's also a possibility, and it would have the same search ranking benefit.
So the blog content will be where it will be hosted in the repo itself, or no, it will be somewhere else?
Yeah, the blog is in the same repo, isn't it?
Yes, it's just a different folder. We have the docs folder and then the blog folder, and so any file that gets put into the blog folder gets published as a blog entry.
Yes. So if we create a series of the blog posts, there are how to something, then we can also have an index to this how to's that is part of documentation to address both way of accessing.
Yeah, and then the keeping it up to date is not our problem because blog posts will come with a big date on the top.
Yeah.
But
okay,
what if someone wants to, the product that changed and they want to give another recommendation, relatively small, that it's too small to create a new blog post? Does we allow to edit the old blog post? Or
we can. I mean, the platform would allow us to. And I think the judgment on that would be, is it a small change or a big change, right? If it's a small change, they just edit the original blog post. And if it's a big change, they actually make a new blog post.
Okay, so.
Looks like we probably need a little more discussion on the maintenance email list. Well,
yeah, that's what I was about to say, Benji. Yeah, I was like, if Nate, want to summarize this discussion and send it to the maintainers and just get their opinion.
Mm-hmm. 。 All right.
Yeah.
I think that's all from our agenda. Is there? Yeah, go ahead, Nate.
Sorry, to the list.
I'm sorry, you're you typing the chat or something? I have to say that now everybody is working from home. The network is pretty good. Nope. It's probably trying to re-enter.
Hold on, he's on Slack, so I'll translate
Okay.
over. Okay. He says, I can summarize the conversation, send out the email, but which email? I don't know.
It's the CNCF HD maintainers one, right?
I think I have Nate's email address. I can send him what he needs. Or is he on Slack? I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. That'd be Nate.
Yeah, maintainers. Yeah, he was asking maintainers list because apparently he got cut off.
Yeah.
So I will tell him that's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
Thank
Wenji,
you.
everyone. Yep.
Have a good day.
Bye. Bye. Good.